I feel like as I've studied history this year, the study of history that, like, my perspective on history has changed a lot because before, like, in elementary school and junior high, I felt like now looking back, I realized that I was getting a very one-sided story of history, not only pertaining to the United States, but world history. And it was just, now looking back, it was crazy how much they filtered the information so that it seemed like I was just getting a very patriotic version of American history, when in reality, after taking this class this year and studying fauna and looking at primary sources and studying what really happened from different perspectives, I found that the American history story that we hear in elementary school and junior high is very, very sheltered. They don't talk about the uncomfortable topics, and they don't cover the controversial events that happened. They really just go into detail on everything patriotic to make you very proud to live in this country. And after studying like history in a very raw and real way this year, it doesn't change my my patriotism for my country. I'm still very proud that I live here and very grateful that I live here and all the freedoms I enjoy. But it's also opened my eyes to that when you study history, you really need to take into consideration all the perspectives, that there's not always a good guy and a bad guy. It's hard to choose a good guy and a bad guy in any situation because you can justify any reason for people doing anything. The Civil War, for example, you could justify the North, which we always seem to classify as the good guy in the American history of like junior high. The North is trying to abolish slavery because it was such a bad thing, but when you look at the South, they were fighting for their livelihood. The slavery was keeping them afloat and keeping them well off and helping them live a stable life. And so I think, and you can take that and put that into any event in history that you study. And so I think perspective is a very big thing. Another thing is, if you choose to and want to study history from a very raw standpoint, like we did this year, you have to be willing to study the uncomfortable and the controversial, because we can't just pretend that didn't happen. We can't go about ignoring the fact that controversial things did happen. It's very much a part of history in any sense, and I think it's super important to dive into the uncomfortable and controversial. And as we've done that this year, it's been a very eye-opening, to what actually has happened in the past. And I've learned things, like, I love to study history, I love to read books about history, but this year kind of like was even more eye-opening to what I already knew. And it was just like, I don't know what other word to use besides eye-opening. It really just caught my attention that there's so many things that people don't talk about, but when you actually study it, all the controversial and uncomfortable events that happened really make up what America is today. And things like that are still continuing to happen. History is still being written. What's happening now is going to become a part of history, and there's controversial and uncomfortable topics to talk about. And so I think it's just important to study the big picture, all perspectives, and know that it's going to be very eye-opening. And so that's what I think the study of history is super important, and that's how I think history should be studied everywhere.